Hello, hello. Hello, am I audible? Hello, hello. Just give me a thumbs up or you can just react if I'm audible. Hey everyone, can you quickly do? Hello. Okay, cool. So first of all, welcome to the session number second of the case study system. In this session, we will be explaining about the guesstimates and how do you approach the guesstimates in an interview setting, and we'll be explaining every single thing from the very scratch. So apologies for the delay because we have been doing this for the very first time, so we got delayed by 30 minutes, so it's apologies for that. And let's move ahead with the session. Okay, just write yes in the chat box if my presentation is visible as well. Okay, cool. Now let's start with the very basics, like what are guesstimates. Now guesstimates are like educated approximation where we use logic, assumption, and structured breakdown to estimate the values where the exact data is not available. So this is something that consultants do often. Now we have like added some of the examples like how many coffee shops are there in Delhi, what is the annual iPhone sales in India, and what is the India's expenditure on pizza and so on and so forth. Okay, now why are guesstimates are asked in an interview? Now guesstimate tests are not just the mathematics or it is a mental math, but it helps the interviewer understand about your thinking process, like how you structure problem, how quickly and logically you break them, and how comfortable you are working with number under uncertainty, because there can be instances where you know nothing about the number, like in this case, like how many coffee shops are there in Delhi. Now it uh, helps you understand about the it helps the interviewer understand about how you structure the problem and how comfortable you are when you are working with the numbers under uncertainties. Now it assess your structured thinking, business acumen, and numerical ability. Now let's dive into the what are the different types of estimates. So I have segregated on two pieces. The number one is the nature of the case and on the basis of the approaches. Now according to the nature of a case, there are standalone cases and then part of market sizing. Now what I meant by a standalone guesstimates. So in these guesstimates, you're like given problems like you have to estimate the number of iPhone users in Delhi. Now let's say there can be other how many burgers McDonald's sells in a day. So such questions are comes under standalone cases where you have to find out such numbers. And in part a part of market sizing, what it meant, so when you solve the market entry cases, so one of the calculations that you do is is you calculate the market size. So it is regarding that. So based on the nature of the cases, there are two: standalone and the market sizing. And based on the approaches, we have three things. Number one is the household approach. So in household approach, we take the households into consideration. For example, if we have to guesstimate, there's a guesstimate where we need to find out the number of people who have ACs in their home. Now here we use a household approach where we keep the household thing into consideration. Then we have the population approach, where we see the entire population. Then we narrow down it, or we can go vice versa to find out the number in these cases. And in the structure approaches, so in structure approach, it is also called as the bottleneck approach. Now, in bottleneck approach, what usually happens, you what first of all, let me explain about what exactly bottleneck is. Now, let's take an example. Uh, now, let's try to explain this with an example. Like, if you have to find out the how many haircut happens in a city every day. Now, let's say Delhi. Uh, Now, in this case, you don't start thinking about how many people want haircuts. Instead, you ask how many barbers are there and how many hair can each do in a day. Because no matter how many people want haircut, the number of barber is what really decide how many people can actually get one. Now, it is like you have like a big jug of juice, but the neck of the bottle is small, so the juice will flow slowly. But even the if the jug is full, the bottle can only take in as much juice as its neck allows. So that small neck is the bottleneck. It is the thing that slows everything down. So we try to figure out what is the thing which controls everything. Now, in this case, the barber, the number of barbers, the availability of the barbers is uh, is something which decides the number of people can get the haircut. So we types of guesstimates on the two cases I've explained. Now let's move forward. Okay. Now there are four key filters that we need to figure out. So basically, when you're solving the guesstimate by the top-down approach. So I'll be explaining that what top-down and the bottom approaches is in the next slides. So we basically try to split the population. Now let's say the population of India is 140 CR. Now we can do a rural urban split in order to find out the solutions in the guesstimates. For example, let's say we have to find out the number of people who eat pizza, or not the number of people. We need to find out the pizza sales or the revenue of pizza, or the we need to find out, let's say, the number of people who smokes cigarettes. Now, in these cases, we can actually split this into, let's say, we can do a 70% for the rural and 30% for for the urban. Like the 30% of the population lives there, and and similarly the other population in the specific part of the country. Now, in these guesstimates, we actually try to break down the problem into the urban and the rural split. Basically, we try to filter down the numbers. For example, in case of cigarettes, the population of rural India, so they very small portion of the uh, population prefer cigarette based. Most of the population uses BD. Now we can actually think of that and divide the population for our estimation accordingly. Even when, as we have discussed the 80-20 rule in the previous session, so we can even ignore the very negligible uh, population in these cases. Now, when we have the gender split, so when we do the gender split, so we take like 50-50% audience, like 50% is male and 50% is female. Now these filters is very helpful when we are estimating something, but their gender is very important. For example, we are estimating the number of uh, let's say we are estimating the number of people who uh, who buys alcohol. Now, in this case, in the example of alcohol, however, the population of female population also consume alcohol, but the portion is very less. So, in this case scenario, we can actually ignore that. Similarly, where we have the age splits. So, age splits is also used in guesstimates where we try to find out the numbers by filter out the numbers based on the age group. For example, For example, I discussed about the example of cigarettes. Now, in case of cigarettes, we have like we can actually do one thing. We can segregate the population from 1 to 18, then 18 to 25 or 30, then 30 plus, and then 60 plus, and we can do according to the cases. Now, in this case, since cigarette is something which is consumed by adults, now we can ignore the 1 to 18. Then there is something, one more example. Let's say we have taken the 60 plus population. Now we can ignore the 60% plus population as well, because they are prone to very prone to diseases. So they don't really consume cigarettes. So we can. So it is that since the life expectancy of an Indian is like 67, if I'm not wrong. So let's say 70. Let's take 70 for simplicity. So we won't be taking that population into consideration because of the health complications. And the population of 18 to 30 will have the highest number of people who consumes the cigarettes. Now we have the income split. Now what we do in income split, we try to segregate the population on the basis of income. Let's say there is a product which is being consumed by uh, a certain class uh, of the country or the population. Now, in this case, we can take that into consideration. For example, I discussed about the pizza example. Now, pizza is something which will not be consumed uh, by the people, by the 20% of the population, so the below poverty line people, then the lower middle class people. So, income split is something that is also should be taken into consideration when you solve the guesstimates. Additionally, there is one more thing. Okay, income split. One more thing that you need to be very sure. So, in case of the income split, you should also let the interviewer know about you should let the interview know about what is the income split that you have taken into consideration. Like, what is the uh, income you have taken into consideration. Let's say you have taken people who earn up to 3 lakhs comes under the lower middle class. Then people who earns from 3 to 8, you have taken that into the middle class, and so on and so forth. So I have like just taken random numbers, but you can think of the numbers way before. Now, what are the different elements of the piece of a guesstimate? Now, I guess it is something that we had discussed as well in the previous session. So, in the previous session, likewise, a normal case interview, the very first thing that you do is you clarify the scope of the problem, and you understand about the problem, and you try to maintain that you and the interviewer are on the very same page. So you need to clarify the scope of the problem. For example, for example, when we are talking about, let's say, the number of people travels in Delhi metro. Now here you can ask then interviewer about what is the day? Is it a Sunday? Is it a holiday? Or is it a peak day, or is it not a peak day? So you can ask certain questions to understand about the scope of the problem. Then you can think of the alternative. Now you can solve the problem into two ways. Number one, the supply side, and the second is the demand side. There you try to understand how many people actually travels in Delhi metro, and the second is the supply side. For example, how many people can actually travel in the Delhi metro. Basically, you try to understand about the from the supply end, like how many people can be actually is it possible for the people to travel in Delhi metro. Secondly, you can make certain assumptions, and then you can clarify with the confirm this with the interviewer. Now, let's say the example that I have explained in the previous slide uh, for the age split. The thing that I've taken into consideration is that the people from 1 to 18, they do not consume cigarettes. Now, in this, what we can do, we can take as this is one of the assumptions, but a very small population of the 1 to 18, they usually consume cigarettes. Now, once you make this assumption, you let the interviewer know that you are making certain assumption, and then the interview will be certain direction, and then you just confirm, and then just go ahead. Now you find a bottleneck. So it is not bottleneck is not something which is not used in all the cases, but in some of the cases it is being used. And thirdly, fifthly is you solving the case without a mess. So you keep everything very very aligned, and you structure it accordingly. So I have like explained this in my previous session, like how do you actually solve a case without a mess. And lastly is the order of magnitude check. Now, what I meant by order of magnitude check, you basically try to confirm it. For example, you're solving a case with an approach. Let's say the demand side approach, and you are coming to a number, let's say 2000. Now, what you do, you'll try to solve it from the supply side as well, uh, and then you try to calculate the standard the deviation. What is the deviation? And if this deviation is very very higher, then you think of the solution, whether you have made any mistakes, or you can there's something that you can do about the solution further. Then we have the strategies. Now this is the very very important topic. It is the most important topic where I need most of your attention. So the very first thing is strategies regarding the setting. Now in the setting, you basically ask certain questions from the interviewer, and you try to understand about the entire setting, like the case problem that you have received. Now first of all, you decide which approach that you are following, and you try to set uh, uh, the strategy accordingly. For example, I can example could be in this case you try to let's say you need to understand about the number of people. uh, now let's say you have to identify the number of ATMs in Delhi. Now in this you can actually uh, 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 you can actually in these cases you can actually select which approach that you can undertake. Now it could be two. You can use this using the household approach, as well as the individual is the population approach. Now you actually here at this point of time you try to figure out which approach you will go further. Then there is the second strategy is the regarding the solution. Now here we have the unit time analysis, lifetime of a product, and the occupancy rate. Now what I meant by the unit analysis. Now in this case, now let's say there is a guesstimate. You basically guesstimate where you need to find out the number. Now let's say the interviewer has given you a question regarding the cigarettes only, like the how many people consumes alcohol, or let's say cigarettes. Now in this case, what is the ask of the interviewer? Whether they want to know about is it for the monthly or the monthly consumption, the daily consumption, or is it the weekly consumption? Now let's say interviewer, you are finding a solution, let's say per month. Let's say uh, you find out that a person consume 30 cigarettes in 30 days per month. Now interviewer has asked you that you need to let him know how many cigarettes are consumed by a person in one day. So you basically divide it by 30, and you get the number. Okay, it's just a one. So you need to understand about the time unit analysis, and you need to ask the interviewer about what is the time unit. Second is the lifetime of the product. And lifetime of the what I meant by the lifetime of a product. Now let's say there is a car or a refrigerator which lasts for 10 years. Now in this case, what you will be doing, you need to understand about the lifetime of a product, and then you need to uh, take the replacement thing into consideration as well. For example, now let's say you have been given a question in which you have been asked about uh, the number of refrigerators sold in a year. Now let's say you there are two cases. The number one is there will be people who will be buying the new refrigerator, and there can be second is the replacement, like the people who will be replacing their existing refrigerator. Now let's say the lifetime of this product is 10 years. Now, once you know about the 10 years, so now let's say you basically let's say the older user is 1 lakh. Now you basically divide this by like 10 years, since the uh, now let's say 10 lakh is the number, and you'll divide it by 10, so you'll get the 1 lakh number. That 1 lakh refrigerators will be replaced because 10 is the number of years. So you'll take this into consideration. So then is the occupancy rate. Now what is the occupancy rate? I can like explain this with the pizza example. Now what let's say we have um, oh, the pizza in the example of pizza. Now let's say we have been asked about how many pizzas are sold in a day by Domino's. Now you try to understand about firstly you try to understand about number of uh, 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 the number of stores. Then you'll identify about the uh, working hours. Then you'll try to understand about the efficacy, like how out of that 40%, for how many times that uh, they can actually produce. So you take that into consideration. So this is the occupancy rate. There could be one more example which can be taken to explain this. Let's say we have to identify the number of people. Now, in this case, now let's say we have to identify the number of people visits a theater for a movie, or let's say there is one more example where we need to find out the uh, okay, okay, okay. of uh, ah, hello, 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 hello. Am I audible now? Right? Am I audible right now? Actually, I lost. Uh, yes, am I audible? Oh, okay, cool. Apologies for this again. Uh, oh, okay, what was the last thing that you were able to hear? From where should I explain again? The entire slide. Okay, I'll explain the entire slide again. So, basically the strategies that we usually follow. So first of all, regarding the setting. So regarding the setting, now let's say we have given a question. So we basically first of all we try to figure out the approach that we're going to follow. Now in this we can follow the household approach, the population approach, or the bottleneck approach. Now the very first thing that you need to do is to understand about the approach that you will be following, and secondly the assumptions that you will be taking, and you need to clear that assumption to the interviewer. Now in regards to the solution, we have basically three important things: the lifetime of a product, the occupancy rate, and the time unit analysis. Now let's say you have been asked a question, so you need to understand about the time unit. Now let's say you have been asked about how many pizzas are sold in Delhi. Now the system is very vague. The question is very vague that the calculate estimate the number of pizzas being sold in Delhi. So you can ask some of the questions like whether the interviewer is asking about the per month sale, the the per day sale, or something, or the weekly sales. So first of all, you need to understand about the time unit analysis. Now let's say you have find that the number of pizzas being sold at XYZ place is 1,20,000. Now the interviewer has asked that you need to explain the uh, uh, explain to him what is the number of pizza in being sold in days. So you will divide it by 30, and you will get to the number 40,000. So this is the very first thing that you need to do is to understand about the analysis and what is the ask of the interviewer. Second thing is that the second thing is the lifetime of a product. Now in this case, there are certain products which have certain lives, and the product is replaced by after a certain period of time. Now in this case, since the lifetime of the product is something which is taken into consideration while solving the guesstimate. For example, we are trying to estimate uh, the number of refrigerator uh, which will be sold in Delhi in 2025. Now there are two things which is can be taken into consideration in case of the refrigerator. Let's say the life of the refrigerator is 10 years, and the number of refrigerator right now is, let's say, 1 lakh. I'm taking arbitrary numbers, 1 lakhs. Now since 1 lakh is the number of refrigerators right now, so what will be the number of refrigerator will be replaced? So it is going to be 10,000. So we know that the 10,000 uh, refrigerator will be replaced. Now in the considering the lifetime of a product, we can estimate the number of refrigerator which will be sold in Delhi as the new sale of of the refrigerators, and secondly the replacement thing. And after summing up, we'll get to know about the number of refrigerators which will be sold in Delhi in a in a year. The this is the now the moving forward to the occupancy rate. Now in occupancy rate, we take the efficiency, and let's say occupancy of occupancy in this case. Now, let's say we have been asked a guesstimate where we need to identify the number of people in a theater who visits theater and watch a movie. Of now, in this case, we can find out that the number of theaters in Delhi is, let's say, 10,000. Is 10,000. After that, what we will be doing will, since the number of theaters is 10,000, now we'll multiply it by the number of seats. Now it could be 600 or 700 as we can think about this. And after that, it is the capacity. But do 600 people visits the theater to watch the movie? Well, we can take, as a logical person, you can take the assumption that not everyone will be watching the movie. The occupancy rate will be 80% or let's say 70%. You can take assumptions and confirm it with the interviewer, and then you take this occupancy thing into consideration, and then you solve the estimate. And the third strategy is the regarding the troubleshooting. Now, what we usually do in this strategy. Now, let's say I have to estimate the number of people who have iPhone in Delhi. Now, since I have seen many people in my college, they own an iPhone. Now, out of like 10, I have seen six people they have an iPhone. But do this 6 out of 10 sample represents the entire population? Well, the answer is no. What we do, we made certain adjustments in this. For example, uh, the very first thing that the people that I know in my college, those who owns an iPhone, they're very rich. We will be doing that. Be taking the income thing into consideration. That this this is not the exact number. This is not something which is very close to the number. So we'll deduct a certain thing that this is not the number which. So we'll deduct a certain number. Now we can take the other things into consideration as well, and we deduct the uh, the assumptions from our sample. For example, let's take one more example to explain this. Let's say we are talking about the cigarettes. Now, in this case, again, now let's say the I have seen like 3 out of 10 consume cigarettes. Now, out of three, do they actually represents the entire population? Well, the answer is no. So we'll detect that the people around me, they are roughly 18 to 30 years old. So they have a higher tendency to consume this specific product. Now, what we'll be doing, we'll be subtracting certain numbers based on our assumptions, and this is how we reach to a certain number. Looking forward, so they are concerned with your approach. They are not concerned with your number, exact number. They are not very concerned with the numbers. They are concerned with the approach, your calculation. So you should be a bit speed at the calculation, and you can approximate your calculation. It is not compulsory that, let's say you are solving a guesstimate and you are reaching to a number, let's say 2.9 or 3. So it is a red flag in this case. So you should approximate your calculation, so your answer should not be accurate, and the approach is something which is very concerned with. The interviewer is concerned with. Now moving forward to the top-down approach and the bottom-down approach. Now in top-down approach, what we do, there is like the entire population, and we try to filter out things, and then we reach to a certain number. And in bottom-down approach, we do the opposite. We scale up from one side to the entire the bigger number. I can explain this with an example. Now, let's say uh, in this case, we are trying to solve the number of people who owns an iPhone in Delhi. Now, we can solve this using the top-down approach that the population of Delhi is 30 million. Now what we'll be doing, we'll be segregating this on the basis of the uh, whether they are urban and the rural, let's say 70/30. Then we'll take the income thing into consideration, and then we will solve it further. Now let's say since there I have already written down here. So this is the entire population. The starting area is the population. Segment A would be the lower class, the middle class, and the lower class, and the rich class. And then we can further go ahead. I explained this, so I guess I explained it in the wrong way. Uh, in case of the number of people who owns an iPhone, in this case we have the entire population, let's say 140 CR. So we'll do that. No, sorry, we were talking in context of Delhi. So we will take the 30 into consideration, 30 lakhs into consideration, and then we will, 3 crore into consideration, and then we will break it down into the rural and the urban, and then into the income groups, and then we can solve it further, like the percentage of people will be owning an Android uh, and an iPhone, and then we'll solve the questions further. So in a top-down approach, what we do, we go from a bigger number to the lower one, and in a bottom-down approach, we do the opposite. For exam, and when you have to choose between the top down and the bottom down, you should prefer the top down, because the bottom down approach is something which is prone to some errors. Now let's say in to approach, now what we do in this case, uh, we try to go from a small number to the bigger number. uh, so first of all, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to clarify the questions like other questions, and you need to go from I can explain this with an example. Now let's say you need to identify the revenue of a store. Now you try to understand, not the store. Now let's say you have to calculate the revenue of uh, McDonald. Now in this case, what you will be doing, you will be first of all calculating the uh, the footfall. You will calculating the revenue of one store, and then you will multiply it by the number of stores available, and then you will reach to a certain number. Now in the bottom approach, we usually uh, de- make certain assumptions. In comparison to the top-down approaches, we are prone to make more assumptions in the bottom-up approach. Now, when you're solving estimates, the if you have to select between these two, the best thing would be to select the top-down approach. And moving forward, the do's and the don'ts. So, don't be in rush, and take your time to gather your thoughts and decide your approach, whether you're going to solve it with the population approach or the household approach or the bottleneck approach. Then you can create a tree diagram like this one when you solve the guesstimates. Then you can relate your assumptions to the facts, experiences, and settings. Now let's say you're making certain assumptions. Now you can relate it to the your real experiences, like I made in the cigarette example. And this is some generic rules. And do not ask too many clarifying questions. Do not ask much questions about the approach. And you should start the solving the case without discussing the. You should not start solving the case without discussing it with the approach with the interviewer. And you should keep your sheet very clean, that in case you have attended the very first session, you might be aware what I'm referring to. And do not randomly guess the number, because the interviewer at the end of the day, they are not concerned with the number, they are concerned with your approach. And then uh, explain your approach, what you're doing in the interview, and that's it. Now I have compiled all the very key statistics that you should remember. Now you don't need to remember all the statistics, but there are key statistics that you should remember. Now let's say this is the economics, and we have the literacy rate, urban, rural spread, farmers. Okay, so I have compiled all the relevant resources, all the relevant statistics that you need to remember. Okay, so I have included everything. Okay, this is something that I had to discuss. So when you solve the market size or the market share, so these are some of the formulas that I've added for your reference. So it will be really helpful when you are calculating the market sizing or the profitability or the loss. So that's it for this session. Thank you for joining us today. I hope it adds some of the value to you. Thank you so much once again for joining the session again. Oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. Oh, okay. Am I audible? Am I still audible? The quiz. Okay, yeah, this is something that I forgot. Uh, for the quiz link, I'll be sharing a QR code right now on the video, and you can get the. Okay, so this is the QR code for the quiz. You need to scan this QR code, and then you'll be able to attempt the quiz. Okay, so thank you so much for joining.